A continuación, seguiremos con un tema que ha ido ganando relevancia, dado que permite prevenir los eventos adversos, como es la gestión de riesgo en enfermería. Esta presentación está a cargo de la enfermera Maureen Bisognano. Ella es presidenta emérita y miembro principal del Instituto para la Mejora de la Atención de Salud, y después de desempeñarse como vicepresidente ejecutivo y director de operaciones durante 15 años. Estamos ante una autoridad destacada en la mejora de los sistemas de atención médica, cuya experiencia ha sido reconocida por la Academia Nacional de Medicina, entre otras instituciones. La señora Bisognano aconseja a líderes en atención médica de todo el mundo, es un orador frecuente en las principales conferencias de atención médica sobre calidad y es una incansable defensora del cambio. También es instructora de medicina en Harvard Medical School, investigadora asociada en la División de Medicina Social y de Salud del Brigham and Women. Preside el Consejo Asesor de Well-Being Trust, copreside el Massachusetts Coalition for Serious Illness Care con el Dr. Arthur Gaywen y es miembro de las juntas directivas del Commonwealth Fund. Les cuento que ella realizó la presentación, su idioma nativo es el inglés, así es que van a verla ella y van a ver los subtítulos en español. Entonces ahora dejo con ustedes la presentación de Maureen. Ya, Walter, ¿puede poner la presentación, por favor?
Hola, I'm Maureen Bisognano, the President Emerita for the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. I wish we were in person, but at least we're connecting, because I wanted to say thank you to all of you, especially the nurses here who have done so much for patients and for families and for each other during this time of COVID. I started my career as a nurse many years ago. I thought I'd show you this picture so that you could smile at how long ago. But I learned some very valuable lessons about the role that nurses can play in care and in compassion. And I wanted to share some of those with you today. The reason I care so much is when I was a young nurse, I was taking care of my nephew, Robbie. This is my sister Ann holding my nephew, Robbie. I'm the oldest of 9 children, so we have 57 in my immediate family. And Robbie was the firstborn. He was so cute, so lively, and I don't think we ever put him in his crib because all the aunts and uncles were holding him all the time. When Robbie was 2 months old, my sister Ann took him to the doctor, and he said Robbie was perfect, which we knew. And then at the end of the visit, he gave him a DPT vaccination. When Ann got Robbie home, Ann is not in healthcare. She noticed that he was having trouble breathing, that his leg was swollen, and she ended up bringing him to the hospital, and he was in the intensive care unit for a week, but recovered fully. And I took this picture of Robbie on his 4-month birthday. The next day, Ann took him back to his pediatrician again, and the doctor said he's perfect. And at the end of the visit, he said, I'm going to give him his DPT booster. And my sister said, don't you remember what happened the last time? And the doctor said no. And she said he had a reaction and it was quite bad and he was in the hospital. The doctor thought for a moment and then he said, you know, I don't think that has anything to do with it. So he said, I'll only give him half a dose. He gave Robbie half a dose and Robbie died within 24 hours. My sister asked me 3 questions that changed everything about the way I looked at nursing. The first question, she said, is why didn't the doctor know that that wasn't the right thing to do? She had looked it up and found that giving half a dose when a person has had a reaction was not the current state of art. And I tried to explain to my sister how complicated it was to keep up with all the latest research. The second question she asked me is, why are Robbie's medical records all split? Like, you've got some in the doctor's office, some in the hospital emergency room, some in the ICU. She said, if we brought all the records together around Robbie, she said, I think the connection would have been clear. And the third thing she said is, why didn't he listen to me? Those three questions came into my heart, and I changed the way I practiced nursing. I began to think that nurses have two really key components in the way that we practice. The first is that we care across the system. We see patients and their families across the system. And the second thing is we can bring compassion. So a lot has changed since Robbie died. And first, I would say that my sister is not a vaccination skeptic, and neither am I. We've all been vaccinated for COVID, and my sister went on to have 2 other boys and vaccinated all of them. It wasn't about the vaccination. It was about the failure to understand what happened to Robbie with the vaccination. Since Robbie died, I think we define harm in new ways. We can measure safety in a different way. We can predict problems and prevent them. Now, data is transparent. We can see how do we stand relative to another hospital, another practice, and teamwork is producing better care. At IHI, where I work, we've created safety change packages, the what to do, and improvement tools, the how to do it. And we're finding that we are listening, and patients and families are in fact co-producing health and care. But COVID is changing the pace for us all. And I think that's given me a new way to think about what nurses bring. We still have so much to improve. At IHI, we created the triple aim. So we're talking about the experience of care: safe, effective, patient-centered, timely, efficient, and equitable. But we're also looking at population health. How healthy is our community, and what can nurses do to step in to prevent health problems? And thirdly, we can work on getting rid of waste. So we're looking at engaging everyone to improve health and care. That's the mission for IHI, improving health and healthcare worldwide. So let me give you some examples of how I see nurses making a huge impact on caring, thinking about the science, the flow, the efficiency, the equity, and the patient-centeredness. There are 3 tools I want to share with you today. The first one is innovation. We need new models of care. The old systems are fragmented still. We've got some wonderful examples, but we need to continuously build new models of care. And I am finding that around the world, nurses are in an amazing position to innovate and create these new models. Second, we need to spread them. It's not right to see great care in one unit in a hospital, but not all, or in one hospital in a city, but not all. We nurses can spread these new innovations so that everybody gets to benefit from them. And third, we need to exnovate. That's get rid of all the old things that don't work anymore. Nurses have typically been great at saving things. And I think when you walk onto a nursing unit, you can always find old forms or old equipment. But we need to exnovate, get rid of all the old stuff, because that gives us time and energy to innovate. So here are a couple of examples. Right before COVID, I got to meet Katrine Friedhoff, a nurse in Denmark. And Katrine is a nurse on the hematology unit, and she does chemotherapy. She was very good at what she did, always taking care of her patients. They would typically be admitted 5 days a week for weeks on end for their chemo. And one day, one of the patients said, "Katrine, I would love to go eat lunch in the cafeteria with my wife." And she said, "No, that's not possible because you've got so much equipment here with the chemotherapy running." And he said, "Well, couldn't we put it on an IV pole?" And so she tried it with him. Katrine, the patient, and his wife, they configured the chemo on an IV pole, and he went and ate in the cafeteria. He loved it. He said, it changes my whole perspective. I'm not sick. I'm getting myself better. So then he said, Katrine, I want to do this at home. And she said, oh, I don't think that's possible. And he said, every day I see you come into work with a backpack. How about if I take my chemo home in a backpack? And so now everybody calls Katrine the backpack nurse, because she and the patient began to figure out how they can do home chemotherapy. And the patients are spending more time with their families. They're eating their regular home meals. They're keeping up with their physical training and their normal pastimes, and they're avoiding the risk of hospital-acquired infections. It's patient-centered. Flow is dramatically improved. It's decreasing complications. It's costing less, and it clearly is helping the patients to get control of their lives, co-producing health and care. So Katrine's work at her hospital, she figured out how to build the case, how to build the will for change. And now people around the hospital are picking up other ideas for backpack nursing. And then it started to spread across Denmark, and now I'm helping Katrine to spread it around the world. It's a great example of one nurse listening to one patient deeply and using innovation skills to produce an amazing and important change that's now spreading around the world. Similarly, here in the United States, a nurse, Sarah Zanton at Johns Hopkins, was working on taking care of elderly people in their home. And she would go into their home with her little bag, do the vital signs, give the meds, talk to the patients about what was going on. And what she found is that then she would look up and the physical environment was impairing their ability to get better. So she created a little test of change using quality improvement, just like Katrine. And she said, we're going to create a team of a nurse, an occupational therapist, and a handyman. And the team started going out for these home visits. What they found is that the handyman had actually the greatest impact on people's health. They were making the environment safer, reducing falls, reducing hazards, and therefore opening up activities of daily living for the elderly. For the roughly $3,000 in program cost, it yields $10,000 in savings. And the patients are reporting fewer symptoms of depression, fewer difficulties in activity of daily living, and they're really saying that they're living their own life. They've got new motivation. So Sarah's one idea is now producing 3 times return, halving the difficulties in function, and improving motivation and the will. So now Sarah is spreading capable around the world, and it's one nurse in one home inspired to use a quality improvement method that's now having an impact on the triple aim in so many places around the world. I know that you just met with Claudia from Albert Einstein, and when I was there, I was so impressed with what the nurses were doing in terms of combining the nurses' knowledge with AI and using nurses' skill and AI to predict patient flow and put patients where they need to be. I've been in a lot of places around the world, but I've never seen a command center like the one at Albert Einstein. And being with the nurses, I said, how did you think of this? And they said, when a patient comes into the emergency room, we often have a very strong gut feeling because of our interactions with the patients. And then when you add on the vital signs and the lab results and the x-rays, very quickly, that knowledge gives them a prediction on which patients are going to need to be admitted and what kind of bed. When I visited Einstein, they had prepared to do a big expansion, but they didn't need to once they got the flow underhand. And this was all because of nurses sharing their knowledge and partnering with AI to produce predictive models that are so much better for the patient. The patients are in the right place at the right time. And I recently visited a new kind of high school. So this is in Providence in Rhode Island. And a group of public health nurses there were taking care of a population in Providence. 90% of the population is very poor. Many of them do not speak English as their primary language. And they were dropping out of high school at a very high rate. High school in the United States is roughly like 13 to 17 years old, and the dropout rate was over 50%. Many of the young women, young girls were getting pregnant so they could drop out of school. And the overdose rate and the alcoholism rate were huge. I've never seen such bad health. So these public health nurses said, why are we waiting until the overdose happens or the unwanted pregnancy happens? Why don't we go upstream and take care of them and keep them healthy? So a group of nurses opened up their own high school, and it's called the Rhode Island Nurses Middle College. They call it middle college, because they say you're on your way to college. You're not going to drop out of high school. These nurses are now running a high school, and it's having an amazing impact on the health of the students, but really the health of the whole community. I sat with these young people on the bottom right. They were 14 years old, and they had just dissected a hamster. They had taken all the organs out, taken pictures, and now they're learning from biology what each organ does. So they're in high school, they're learning language and mathematics, but they're also learning health and healthcare. And the health of these kids was incredible. The kids showed me how they had to spend a day in a wheelchair or with a cane. They wore these glasses that each one of the pairs of glasses simulates an eye problem, astigmatism or glaucoma, so that they are in the shoes of the people that they're working with, and they have empathy and compassion as well as the technical skills. You can see from the classroom in the bottom how many languages are spoken in each classroom. And they have to do these major projects. Like the young girl on the top left told me she did a major project on Alzheimer's because all 4 of her grandparents have Alzheimer's. And they said to her, we feel like our head is in a box. We can't get out. And so she's learning how to communicate. They're learning art, and all of the pictures on the right are art paintings, but then you can see that the skin is open. So they're learning not only the art, but they're learning the anatomy and the physiology as well. I don't think I've ever been in such a place with so much hope and future. And then nurses in Belgium and other places around the world looked at the stress of little kids going to the operating room. And they said, for the most part, what we do is we make the kids take off their clothes and put on a Johnny, put in an IV, get on a stretcher and put a sheet over them, and then say goodbye to your parents. The stress levels by the time the kids get to the operating room are through the roof. And there's been a lot of research lately that shows that when the stress levels are high going into the operating room, that the patients need more anesthesia, more post-op pain medication, and have longer hospital stays. So the nurses went to the automobile manufacturers and they said, make us a little Audi, make us a little Mercedes, a little Lamborghini. And when the kids are ready to go to the operating room, they go pick out which car they want to drive themselves to the operating room. The stress levels are dramatically reduced because the kids are in control. They're happily saying goodbye to their parents because they're on their way to drive to the operating room. And what you see is that by changing the processes, we're actually co-producing better care with our patients. So nurses are great at redesigning care, innovation, spread, but nurses are also great at compassion. We see the patient and the family as a whole. And a few years ago, when I was on my way to Paris to do a plenary for IHI, on the plane, I read an article, and in the article by Susan Edgman-Levitan and Michael Barry, it said, we can't only ask the patient what's the matter. We also have to ask what matters to you. So I ripped up my plenary on the plane and totally rewrote it around this idea. I said, Susan and Michael, tell us, We can't only ask what's the matter. We have to ask what matters to you. So I said to the audience, thousands of people, when you go back, I want you to ask the patient what matters to you. And this nurse, Jen Rogers from Scotland, wrote to me within a week, and she said that she had had a profound experience when she did that. The first patient she asked was a little girl. Her name was Kendra. She's 7 years old, and she has severe autism. So she's never spoken in her life. So when Jen asked her what matters to you, she said, her father said she needs crayons. So they gave her a piece of paper, and Kendra and her father made this poster. What matters to me? My name is Kendra. I'm 7. I say hi by pulling your hair. I don't like medicine by my mouth, so watch out. I will struggle. It's a 3-person job. I'm very fast and I can put things in my mouth and make a run for it. I love cuddles to reassure me. I can dress myself with some help. I can do high five, and I love noisy toys. Kendra and her father put this on the door to her room at the hospital, the pediatric hospital. And that night, Kendra's father had a cardiac event, and he was taken to the adult hospital on the other side of Glasgow. Kendra was all by herself. And the doctors and nurses said, because this poster was on the door, they knew how to take care of Kendra. If she pulled their hair, jumped out of bed, fought them, and they didn't know about her, they said they would have sedated her and restrained her, but they didn't. They knew how to take care of her. So that powerful story started to spread all over the pediatric hospitals in Scotland. And then it went to the adult hospitals. You can see in the upper right, a few weeks after I heard from Jen, I got a poster from Brazil in Portuguese. And the nurse at the bottom works in a geriatric hospital. What happened was it started to spread, and everybody started to recognize the power of flipping from what's the matter to also asking what matters to you. It went to Norway and Brazil and Scotland and Italy and British Columbia and Denmark. And now we meet a bunch of people from all over the world. It's in 50 countries, 2,000 teams in healthcare organizations all over the world. And the people who have changed their practices by asking what matters to you are saying that it's making a huge difference, not only for the patients, but for their families and caregivers, and for the teams themselves. So what we're finding in our research is that basic acts of kindness can lead to faster wound healing, reduced pain, anxiety, and blood pressure, shorter hospital stays, and it's making a huge difference in people's lives. Imagine a nurse who did this like Jen Rogers did, and now is finding that there's shorter hospital stays, fewer patients needing medication. What she's finding is that she has created the triple aim: better health, better care at a lower cost. And so last year, Jen Rogers, that nurse in the pediatric unit, was named by the Prime Minister Scotland's Woman of the Year, not just in healthcare, Scotland's Woman of the Year, because she's made such a profound difference in the culture. And people everywhere in the country and now all over the world are saying not only what's the matter, but what matters to you. And it's not just the patients, as I said, it matters to the staff, and especially in this time of COVID. I think asking what matters to the staff is making a huge difference. One of my friends in England is the CEO of a major academic medical center in London. And when COVID hit, she saw the stress that her staff were under. And she was talking about who in the world knows how to manage stress. And so she collaborated with British Airways. A lot of the flights, as you know, had been canceled. And so British Airways pilots and flight attendants came to all the major hospitals in London, and they set up first-class lounges, like British Airway lounges. They set up coffee and tea and little cakes, and they staffed it 24 hours a day because they have been taught how to manage stress. They sat and they coached, and the staff had such a wonderful experience knowing that when they had a very bad shift or they were in the middle of a losing a patient, that they could go to the lounge and somebody would help them. It's made a huge difference. And really, I've been working in all over the world with a project called Nursing Now, looking at what are our needs, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't give. I always say, you can't give what you don't have. So I want to leave you with a couple of tools for thriving now, especially in this time of COVID. We've got to work on the caring, innovation, making care safer, decreasing flow problems. We've got to work on compassion for our patients and families and our team members. So that means we need to take care of ourselves. So I would say these are some tools. The first is think about your PPE, your personal protective equipment, but also think about your psychological PPE. And what I'm seeing now is that in the donning and doffing, when teams are changing shift, they're not only taking off and putting on the new equipment, but they're talking with their team about what I'm going home to or what I just left. And donning and doffing, the stress of working in these COVID times is really helping a great deal. This is IHI's method for working on psychological PPE, really to promote our mental health and well-being. The second thing is exnovate to innovate. That is, get rid of things that don't add any value. I'm afraid after COVID that we might go back to starting to do some of the things that we now know don't add any value. So I would say make a to-don't list, not only a to-do list. What are the things that you don't want to do, that you don't need to go back to? And at IHI, I made a grr wall. I took a big white wall that you could write on with magic markers, and across the top I wrote GRRRR. And I said, anytime during the day when you find yourself saying grr because you're so frustrated, go write what made you frustrated on the wall, because we need to capture those ideas from frustration that will inspire us to innovate. And then plan to learn to see. Make a journey map, make an appointment, try and figure out what it's like to be a patient nowadays. And so here you might think about it. This is from Northern Ireland, a team I've been working with there, that says we will free up time by not commuting so much, by not having so many meetings, by looking at predictive data, and that will help us too. So this idea of an exnovate to innovate map, I think, can be very helpful, because you're specifically saying we're not going back to this, and that frees up this many hours a week, and that is going to allow us to spend more time with our patients or our teams. So make a plan for you. Keep remembering you can't give what you don't have. So I would recommend that every Sunday evening, plan for the week. Think about your IQ. What are you going to learn? Because in this day, it's so easy to just say, I'm too busy to learn, I'm burned out. But you could read an article, or you could call a mentor. I have never mentored more people than I have in this year for COVID. Watch an open school course on the IHI website, or write, make a diary, but do something to stimulate your learning, your IQ. On your EQ, your emotional quotient, or your empathy, ask what matters to you, to a patient. Take a journey through care. Watch what happens when you discharge someone to home. So you really get empathy by looking at the whole journey. That's what gives nurses so much compassion. And then CQ, curiosity quotient. Work on your CQ. Ask someone that you don't work with every day, what are you proudest of? How did you know? And ask for someone to take you on a little journey, to teach you something, because I think it really creates a sense of energy when you specifically focus on your CQ. Ask what matters to you, to your patients, and to their families. to your team each day, did anything make you smile? There's a wonderful story from Denmark where the team was donning and doffing, and at the end of each shift, they would say, did anything make you smile? And one of the night shift nurses said that she had a smile in the previous shift, and she was taking care of the most difficult patient on the unit, an elderly man who was always yelling and cranky and wouldn't do anything, very uncooperative. And that day she walked in and she said, what matters to you today? And he said, I want to wear my blue shirt. And she said, why do you want to wear the blue shirt? And he said, that was my wife's favorite shirt, and she died 2 years ago today, and I want to honor her. So the whole time the nurse was bathing him and getting him dressed, they were talking about his wife and his life. And when he came out of the room that day, he began to join in with other patients. It changed his life and it changed her life. That one simple question. Ask your family over dinner tonight what matters most to you, and ask yourself as you get ready for bed. I want to tell you that today, your day, the day that you're all meeting, is Global What Matters to You Day. It's our 8th day, our 8th year of coming together on a specific day and everywhere, all around the world, asking what matters to you. We do it every day, but it's a specific day to celebrate, and today is that day. So I did have the great honor of meeting the Dalai Lama once, and I follow him now, and he said this. He said, today, the world is interdependent as never before, which is why we need a keen sense of the oneness of all human beings. We have to take the whole of humanness into account. We have to understand what we have in common with everyone else. So we need to connect and create a sense of interdependence. And that's what matters to you is. That's what nursing does. So I invite you to join me in our global campaign. We're calling it Nursing Now. We started this a few years ago. Nurses from all over the world in every country looking to improve health globally. We know we can't improve health unless we get nurses engaged to work on non-communicable diseases in different settings like primary and community care, in prevention and promotion. And then we started last year the Nursing Now Challenge. We're asking for nurses around the world to take up mentoring young nurses. Our goal was to get 100,000 nurses and midwives by the end of 2022 into leadership tracks. So we're mentoring, we're opening up courses to them. We're giving them opportunities and having them meet with people. Our goal is if we can get nurses into leadership positions, we can improve health globally by raising the status and the profile of nursing. So I would ask you to accept the Nightingale Challenge. So far, we've got 31,000 nurses and midwives in our leadership courses, 79 countries, and partnerships around the world of people coming together to say, this really matters. So I ask you to join us. It's a growing movement. In 2 years' time, we've gone from really just beginning to build awareness to a global campaign. And I think that it means that we all need to work together. So gracias. I know that we're just beginning our journeys together, but I am so grateful to you for all that you've done and for all that you will do. Thank you.